Good morning, afternoon, evening, everybody. My name is Mike at Filmboy24. Today we're going to do something that, well, I haven't done in several years, or at least attempted to do in several years, and that's to process this very old Ektachrome 160 type G film in color. So first, let me say it feels really good to be back. I've had so much going on the last couple of weeks that I really haven't been able to shoot a lot of videos or a lot of film. As many of you know, I have two daughters, school-age daughters, and school starts in a couple days, so I had a lot of that to deal with. I just had a lot going on, but school's starting, and it's bad for the kids because most of them don't like school, but it's good for me because the kids will be in school and I can shoot more film and more videos. Anyway, I'm going to do something today, well, I actually already did it, that I haven't done in a long time. And yeah, just like I said a minute ago, I'm going to try to get some color out of this really old EM26 process film, which is long defunct. This is the G160 or 160 speed Ektachrome Type G film, when Type G film was the daylight balanced film of its time. So this old roll here, this is the exact roll that I actually have already processed it, but it's right here. This is a roll of film that I actually got just a few days ago inside a camera that I bought on eBay. It wasn't this particular camera. It was the AutoZoom 1014 electronic. This is my 814, but this roll of film was inside it. Now it was partially exposed and I didn't know how much it was exposed. So this is sort of a half and half found video film process episode and half just some junk that I shot. The only purpose for this was to just see if I could get any type of color at all out of this old film. No idea how it was stored, no idea how old it is. My guess, probably mid-80s. Early to mid-80s. I can't remember the rectangle. You see these rectangles on the front face of the film carts. I know the white inner with the blue writing is the newer stock. This might actually even be newer than that. I can't remember. At any rate, I don't know what year this film expired. I don't know how it was stored. I don't know if it was in the camera for 100 years and stored in a basement garage with water dripping on top of it, or if it was stored in a freezer. Probably not, because it was in the camera. So what I did is I put it in my 814 electronic and just took it into my front and backyard and tried to expose it at around 80 ISO. And I found an issue with this camera. This is my fun camera. I really enjoy this little Canon, but I'm having a lot of trouble now with its manual exposure, because you see, you can't really manually or auto expose this in here because it'll way underexpose it, which this kind of did anyway, so be ready for that. The film is underexposed. Now, I did find out that about the first 25 to 30 feet of this was already previously exposed. That has also been processed, and you'll see that in a second. Back to this though, the manual exposure on these cameras is pull out this dial like that, and then you just turn the dial left and right and it moves the needle and properly opens the aperture to your desired f-stop. Well, on this one, you see, in the inner workings of these cameras, when you pull this out, it's actually pulling a little rubber grommet up and makes contact with a metal piece. And as you turn it, that grommet is turning the metal, I don't know all the scientific names, but it's actually opening and closing the aperture on your lens. Well, the rubber, assumably, is completely worn out. I've read that that happens with these cameras a lot. So I'm going to have to disassemble this at some point. I'm a little nervous. The auto exposure works perfect, so maybe I won't because I love this camera. Anyway, I did manage to shoot the rest of this film. It was about 20 feet. Side note, I always shoot at 24 frames per second. And I set this camera at 24 frames per second, forgetting that the first 25 or 30 feet of this was likely shot at 18 frames per second. And it was. I could tell when I was scanning it. So what I went ahead and did was I scanned the film and then I rendered it at 24 frames per second. So the first little bit of film that you see that was shot from the original owner, which was grossly overexposed, by the way, and you'll see in a second, was actually shot at 18 frames per second, so it's sped up to 24. In hindsight, I probably should have done it the other way around. I probably should have just rendered my portion at 18 frames per second and let that sort of slow down a little bit, really, because it's a lot less effect on it than the way you'll see it. Anyway, I processed the film in E6 chemicals. Now, I did a lot of research beforehand, and I had done it in the past, but I didn't have very much success. So what I read was some people were talking about processing at lower temperatures. Some people were talking about keeping it at its native, roughly 100-degree Fahrenheit temperatures. I was a little torn, but then I finally decided, and I have an old batch of E6 that was mixed, I don't know when. I usually mark it, but I didn't. And it was probably mixed at least 6 months ago, so I really wasn't sure if it was even any good. But I decided to go ahead with the full normal temperature of the develop. So everything I did with this roll of film was at 100 degrees Fahrenheit. It was actually more around 101 degrees Fahrenheit. So what I started with was my normal rimjet bath, because this film has rimjet on it that you really need to try to get that off of there before you process it, or at least as much as you can to where a lot of it doesn't come off in your developer. So I used my normal process, which is 4 tablespoons of washing soda, 1 tablespoon of baking soda mixed with 1 liter of 100-ish degrees tap water. And I typically keep it at room temperature, but for this, I also use my God, I'm talking a lot. I also use my rimjet bath as my pre-bath to sort of bring my film and tank up to temperature. So 100-degree rimjet bath, and my normal process is pour the chemicals, pour it into the tank, and I agitate it for about 10-15 seconds, pour it out, then I add my warm tap water, and that I agitate like, and I get it all gazooged, pour it out, and that drain of tap water is the one that's supposed to be black. Okay, so my first drain was very, very tinted pink. So obviously a lot of red dye coming out of this film, or pink dye, red. My second rinse, or my first rinse, was absolutely black, like ink. So I knew I was getting some rimjet, which was bing! Sometimes you get nothing and you have to do it all at the end. I did 2 or 3 more rinses after that, and they got decreasingly black until it was clear. Then I knew I was fairly safe to start my chemicals. I did my first developer at 101 degrees for about 6.5 minutes. I then washed for about 2 minutes. I did my color developer for 4.5 minutes at 101 degrees Fahrenheit, washed for a couple of minutes. I then finished off with my Blix at 101 degrees for 6.5 minutes, washed. Well, I washed some more. I then needed to get the remaining rimjet off, at which point I opened the top. What I typically do is I take the top reel of my Lomo tank, the top sort of cap that holds the film in place, and I rotate it, and it gives it some space because it makes it the 16 millimeter-ish height. And I then take the film and I pull some out into my sink. I mount a rewind and I put a 50-foot reel and I run some tap water and I sort of just clean it with my fingers and get that residue off of there as I'm winding it onto a brand new, fresh 50-foot reel. That reel then goes into a 250 milliliter distilled water and photo flow bath. For about 2 minutes, I just kind of get it all zhuzhinated. And then from there, I squeegee with a couple of fingers onto a fresh 50-foot reel, take it into the drying room, known as the bathroom, and I hang it on my shower curtain rod, hanger rod ring thingy majig, let it dry for a couple hours, we end up with this. So what did we end up with? Well, we ended up with an incredibly green film. I don't know if you can see that or not. Very, very green tint to it. I can only say there is some color, a lot of green, very little red. I think most of it came out in my wash. Now the colors are shifted horribly. Before I go too much farther, let me say I also did film my Spider Checker 24, which is simply a color chart used for film and video and photo. It just has 24 colors on the front, and then it has your grayscale, black and white and grayscale on the back. And you essentially film this, and it helps you to adjust the colors later in your film. You're supposed to film this, you know, for a second or two every time you film a new scene or move to a new area. Well, I don't typically do that. If I film outside, I'll film it once maybe. I'm not very good at color grading and color correcting, so keep that in mind when you see this film. So without any further, we'll talk about it in a minute, but take a look at the film. Yeah, so the good news is there's actually some color, and that was my only goal here. First, to see if I could do it in this hot of a temperature process without melting the emulsion off, and second, to see if I could get any color at all. Colors. Any color at all, I was going to be happy. So I'm actually quite happy. There is color. Now, it's shifted like crazy. It's very muted, it's very grainy, it's very foggy. Well, it wasn't a good film. It wasn't a good job. You could tell that there was a dog, looked like a chow at the beginning, very overexposed. Let me show you just a clip or two really quick of what I had to work with straight out of the scanner with no correction at all. You know, as you can see, you got some latitude with it. It is film. It's got way more latitude than does video. So, you know, this is what I do. I love to experiment with film. It's not for everyone. A lot of people say that shooting this old expired film is, well, silly. Well, you're silly. It probably is. If you're going to ever shoot anything serious, don't use this. use the new Ektachrome or some Vision stocks. Or you'll end up with that, you know. The stuff that I shot at the end there, it was very underexposed. I know that. Again, I really just wanted to see if I could get some color out of it. It's kind of like my 9th grade principal's daughter's best friend's neighbor that lived on the opposite street as me. Their mailman used to tell me all the time, if you're not experimenting with color film, well, you're just not living life. And that's what I want you to do. Live life a little bit. Have a little fun with film. If you like videos like this and you want to see more, I got some found film coming soon. And we're going to do some more fully exposed carts. Do me a huge solid. I'm not going to do it anymore. It's been a year now, as of August 8th, since I've been on YouTube. I am no longer going to ask you to punch the like button. I'm just going to ask nicely. Just flick it. Just tap it. Tap the like button for me. How about subscribe and become part of this illustrious Filmboy24 family where we have a lot of experimental fun. And until the very next time that I see every one of you beautiful people, I'm going to continue with this. I'll see every one of you on the next go-around.